Hello and welcome to ADIPEC Energy Dialogues, a series of conversations we're bringing you in the run-up to ADIPEC 2020 taking place this November. We're talking to leading industry analysts and experts, as well as participants in the industry on the current state of digital innovation across the range of oil and gas. And today I'm very pleased to be joined by Chris Leonard, who is the Director of Strategy and Digital Transformation North America for Plains Midstream Canada. Chris, welcome to Energy Dialogues.
Jeffrey, thanks very much for having me.
Let's begin first with your appraisal of the current state of digital innovation in the midstream industry, by which we refer to that portion of the industry between the upstream where oil and gas is extracted and downstream where it's distributed into the market. What is your sense is the current state of innovation here?
Interesting. It's a very interesting time in the midstream space right now. A number of socioeconomic and political factors are really sort of playing in the midstream space as it is amongst the sort of energy industry as a whole. Certainly the supply and demand imbalance is affecting the midstream sector. The rise of sustainable resources are playing a role in longer term strategies and obviously the higher operating costs. So this makes it quite a unique environment as we currently look to try and drive digital innovation. I think in a broad sweeping general term, I think midstream as a whole, as well as the energy industry, is lagging behind in digital adoption when we compare it to other key industries. I think digital does need to become a strategic imperative. I think we need to greatly improve our sort of data management and integrate digital technologies better, but we've got to take into account the associated people and process changes as well. I think the key really is we produce enormous amounts of data, particularly off our SCADA systems, and we need to start better utilizing that into real-time insights to inform business-related decisions.
Now, in your role, you're exposed to not just your own organization's digital strategies, but how peer companies are also embracing digital in the context of their business strategies. How do you see the alignment between digital and business strategies unfolding today in the midstream sector?
I think what's pivotal is that they are complementary. Days probably have gone by where you get a long 5 or 10 year sort of business strategy to which the IT department or IS department would provide the IS component of it, and it would be an additional or an add-on or an annex. I think you've really got to be writing these strategies complementary to each other and at the same time, because you've got to drive towards the same business outcomes. So whether it be a digital or a technology strategy, I think it really must align to the key business outcomes that the organization is overall driving towards. I think the other change that we've seen that was probably precipitated by the introduction of digital technologies is those traditional longer term planning horizons of 5 and 10 years. Certainly in the digital strategy space, we've really had to foreshorten. Digital is moving at such a pace. The evolution of digital technology, the art of the technically possible, is so much greater now that realistically those 5 and 10 years are too long. Things change too quickly. We've got to shorten that. And certainly in my experience, we're looking probably at a maximum of a 3-year long-term strategy horizon, but refreshing our sort of operating plans annually.
How do you see the operating models for midstream companies reacting in this context? Because after all, midstream assets are, generally speaking, heavy industrial assets, cement and steel, and as a result, they have fairly long lives, and yet the operating models are under some pressure. How do you see the operating models shifting as a consequence of this wave of change we're experiencing?
I think we've certainly got to focus on 3 key areas of a traditional operating model. The way in which we work, where we hold our decision rights, and finally our organizational structure. So if we go back to sort of decision rights, real-time data is allowing and enabling decentralized decision making. So when digital plays an important role or an ever increasing role in your organization, part of the operating model review needs to really focus on who holds the rights to which decisions at which level. And I would suggest that digital is enabling a decentralization and a pushing to a lower level of decision-making authority. I think the way in which we work as well, digital enables speed. And so therefore, we must streamline our business processes. Lengthy siloed processes that haven't been sort of looked at horizontally, to have single accountable business process owners that we can easily then both adopt and streamline through the enablement of digital technology is critical. You can't just throw a digital technology in there and not look at the associated people and process change. And finally, the organizational structure. I think what we're definitely seeing is flatter organizations as a result of decentralized decision-making. We're seeing multi-skilled teams able to basically go across business silos and be able to operate at a much higher speed. So therefore, our organizational structures are moving away from those traditional hierarchical structures and much more to flatter structures, able to demonstrate greater agility.
And how do you see the, in this context, how does work therefore change in a company? Does it mean a shifting in the patterns of work, the traditional patterns of work that would have been, we would have experienced in the past?
I think the way in which we work will change. I think whereas in the past, there would have been quite slow, quite laborious, quite methodical processes that people needed to follow. And let's, we're putting this in the context of the oil and gas industry, highly regulated, very safety conscious, lots of very specific processes, management of change and methods of change are very, strictly adhered to, and quite rightly. We're now seeing that sort of challenge of the orthodox with a digital technology or technologies that can enable much quicker decision making. So therefore, the way in which we work does need to change, but it needs to change in a measured way. It needs to change with a view to the people, process, and technology combination, that triumvirate. You cannot just change one and not have an impact on the other two.
And I suspect too, just taking that thought further, it does no good to accelerate decision making in a process area so that it moves much faster and is closer to the front of the business, and leave a part of the business which makes a different decision related to that process area still laboring under traditional ways of thinking. And hence the challenge: how do you move the whole organization along at the same pace at the same time, which is a particularly challenging exercise. Are you seeing this as an example, this kind of thing that creates some of the challenge in embracing digital change?
I think it changes your approach to how you look to instigate change. I think previously you'd be able to support directly a business unit. You'd be able to automate some of their processes through, robotic process automation as an example. But now, as we increasingly start to see more digital technologies prevalent, we've got to actually probably follow the value chain within an organization and not just the business unit alignment based upon traditional organizational hierarchy and structure. Actually, we use the term follow the molecule. Where is the molecule going? Where is the value chain? Look at those end-to-end business processes and look at where technology can be adopted there. That provides a more holistic approach. It enables you to make measured change, and it also allows you to more clearly identify and see where those silos may exist and overcome them.
In a complex business like the midstream, which would feature gathering of hydrocarbons, storage, blending, trading, cleansing, and treatment, and so forth, digital innovation and organizing for digital innovation would be a specific and unique challenge, I think. How do you see different ways of organizing for digital innovation unfolding in the industry these days?
Well, I can certainly suggest that one of the things that is working around digital innovation is the art of storytelling. The ability to explain the art of the possible, which puts more emphasis on digital drivers being or having high levels of business acumen, certainly align digital and business strategies. I think there needs to have been an evolution to a state where you have a trusted strategic business partnership between the IT, the IS teams, the digital teams, and the business teams, and actually they become integrated. And the only way to really achieve that are embedded teams. And you increase your understanding in detail of how your business unit works, and then your ability to tell the story of how a particular digital technology can positively affect that value chain is critical. And I think we're getting better at that increasingly.
There's a bit of a push and a pull here as you think about it. A local team comprising operational, information technology, digital and business professionals working to solve specific problems need to at the same time have their sights set on a much larger agenda. Otherwise, you run the risk of a whole series of small and inconsequential changes at the same time as the broader industry could be changing quite rapidly. How do you see the digital innovation teams compensating or offsetting for this risk?
You know, it's absolutely a critical factor. And the reason I say that is because digital technologies are coming at us so hard and fast. Marketing from modern digital technologies is so effective. It is easy to take your eye off the ball of what you're actually trying to achieve within your business sort of focused area. And this is why I go back to that original point about that collaboration, that joint process of developing business strategy. The digital strategy needs to be woven within it. It needs to be an integral part of it, which maintains and then keeps people focused on driving towards the outcome. Very easy to go to the next greatest thing, because version 1, 2, and 3.0, instead of taking, years now, take a matter of weeks. And so therefore it's very easy to go, crikey, have we missed an opportunity here? Should we jump to this? Should we jump to this? Well, actually work backwards from the problem. What's the outcome you're trying to achieve, and what does the business really need? And then look at the technology that's going to enable that. You don't need to have the latest and greatest digital technology to achieve a set business outcome. You might be able to accelerate the achievement of that outcome. You might be able to scale that outcome, but be focused on making sure, you are a provider of a service internally to your organization. Listen to what your customer needs, not what you'd probably like him to buy.
Mm. I'd like to turn back to this question or topic you raised early on, which was around teams and team structures. There's many ways to organize and deliver against business objectives, but clearly this notion of a very flexible team structure is now suddenly paramount. I wonder if you could comment on the kinds of team structures that you're now seeing that are possible with digital.
Absolutely. I think one of the common changes we're seeing is moving away from that sort of traditional organizational structure that you'll have seen in an IT shop, from that sort of planning, the building, and then the running. 3 quite distinct silos with interfaces in between. And I think what you're now seeing is that move to those multi-skilled, multidisciplinary teams that have a plan, a build, and a run component all in one, and probably aligned around a recognized and identified platform. We are moving to platforms. We're organizing our structures around platforms. And if you can make the platform aligned to obviously your value chain or where it's best suited within your business, you then embed those teams within the business as well. They're able to do all 3 themselves, as opposed to those previously siloed plan, build, run structures.
Okay. I would like to go back to platform though, because that's a very interesting word. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit when you say platform. What do you mean by that?
So I think certain technologies are so pervasive, and maybe a previous example was, your ERP of choice, let's call it SAP. You probably regard that as a platform. It is used broadly across an organization. It has multiple touch points. It requires multiple support, and you're always listening to your customer in various different organizations within your business, asking for better increased functionality, enhancements, and so I would suggest that that is a type of platform, as opposed to maybe a minor application that has a smaller touch point, a smaller customer base, a smaller user base, whereby that would still be sort of, grouped together with other similar applications, but wouldn't necessarily constitute a platform.
I understand the perspective now. Thank you for that. Let's go back to the question of people and team and skills. As this wave of change is clearly very people centric. What Zoom has taught the industry is that we can distribute our people resources into their homes and still continue to carry on business, creating this distribution structure now. How do you see distributed teams and their role in the future? Is this a short-term phenomenon, or does it feel more like it could become a permanent fixture of the oil and gas industry?
I think it's a natural evolution, if the truth be told. I think if you only need to look at sort of, offshore resources and application managed services and contracts where, for instance, as an example, you have an application development team based in India, but supporting an organization that's based in North America. It's distributed. We've already been there. This is just a natural evolution created, albeit by a catalyst of a pandemic. But what I think the pandemic has demonstrated is that where in the past we would have had real apprehension in such a short period of time moving to a distributed workforce, I think we've actually proven en masse it can succeed and does succeed and is possible. And I think that's now really truly revising, ways of working within your operating model. And more organizations are now saying we don't need our workforce centrally located in a downtown large-scale office building. We're comfortable that we're not having our business interrupted and people are distributed. It's been a really interesting time, and the pandemic has been that catalyst to sort of just take that evolution a step further.
Yes, it's been instructive in a number of ways, and one in particular is answering the question about where people physically need to be in order to execute meaningful work, but also highlights the pace of change can actually accelerate quite a bit in oil and gas, and still be safe, reliable, and with high integrity at the same time. It's not a either or proposition, how it's often been expressed in oil and gas. Now, this also brings us to this bigger question of talent models in oil and gas. The industry has a history driven through very, very carefully designed and crafted curriculums to train the right numbers of individuals with the right skill sets to satisfy the needs of this industry. But talent models may be changing as a consequence of digital. How are you seeing talent models flexing and changing and shifting in the midstream industry as digital innovations begin to make their way into the sector?
I think there's a couple of different ways in which I'm sort of visibly seeing this change. And the first is that, IT isn't just an IT game anymore. Technology isn't just the IT's area of expertise. We're seeing decentralization to citizen data analysts. We're seeing the ability to use certain technologies by our business users themselves with a very elementary amount of training. For example, the number of people now within an organization that can literally, with a very little amount of training, get great benefit from Microsoft Power BI to create their own analytic dashboards. I mean, these are things that, business users use. So we see that change happening where that decentralization of technology occurs. I think increasingly, as we get more sort of slightly specialist in some of the digital technologies, so certain resources become that much more scarce. Data scientists is a great example. Wouldn't everybody love to have, a group of data scientists working within their organization to really raise that bar around how to utilize data? But the fact is there simply globally aren't enough. So you're having to outsource, or you're having to remotely go to third-party sort of vendors to provide these levels of expertise. So your talent model is starting to become hybrid. You're probably going to have to outsource where you can't recruit that specialist expertise in sufficient numbers. Conversely, you probably want to keep close to sort of, your full-time employees, your strategy, probably your strategic business analysts, certainly the retention of your IP and how you manage your data. So that's probably something you're not going to see decentralized. But then when you've got such offerings as PaaS and SaaS, and we're not talking too much now around sort of on-prem, but are not all going to cloud. So actually your ability to manage multiple contracts through third parties becomes ever more important. I'd say those are the major trends I've seen in the changing the talent model.
And are the frontline staff that are confronting or being encouraged to work with these tools, to what extent are their skill sets, do they require enhancement or upgrading so that they can participate in this new world?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the roles is going to be keeping up pace with the appetite that greatly increases. We see an exponential increase in sort of people's appetite and desire to do even more with some of these technologies. And so absolutely keeping pace with their appetite is key. Conversely, let's still make sure that we're helping them tell the right story. Don't get carried away with the full functionality. Make sure that you're utilizing that sort of dashboard to visualize something that's quite complex and make it simpler for people to understand, to make better business decisions. Don't just recreate net new dashboards that aren't telling the right story or are incoherent. So it's keeping up with the appetite, but maybe advising and mentoring in their use.
That is a great risk of accelerating these tools allow people to work with data, but in an untrained fashion can actually get to very, very misleading results. And if we take poor decisions on the basis of bad data or bad results, it won't service the industry well. Let's turn back to the pandemic though, because we're right in the middle of this. And the point we raised earlier was that industry has now experienced the fact that a pandemic-driven event can drive hyper-accelerated pace of change. What other changes do you see coming at industry because of the effect of the pandemic?
I mean, I think the one area that we've covered, but I think it's the one nearest to executives' hearts right now is what is the new norm for working? What is the hybrid model going to be? I don't think we're going to see a complete move to remote working, nor do I see us returning to our previous ways of centralized workforces. I think we will absolutely see a hybrid. But then how does that affect your customer-supplier relationship? How does that affect that interaction with, face-to-face rather than sort of over video? Where are those sort of human touch points going to be lost? What's that sort of longer term impact potentially on the psychology of your employee? If the emphasis now is decentralized and more people are going to remotely work from home, what's that impact to their family life? What are the changes going to need to be made maybe in the working day? The traditional working day of in the morning to late afternoon, early evening might need to shift if we're reliant on our workforce to do their work from home. There might be other commitments. It's the human impact aspect of remote working where, yes, the physical location is one aspect, but what are the other aspects around truly adopting a hybrid workplace? Where's that going to go? And how do we enable our workforces to be as effective, if not more effective, from a hybrid work environment?
Let's wrap up now with your sense of outlook for the future of the industry, given this wave of digital change and the impact that it could have. If you were to, put your crystal ball in front of you and forecast the midstream industry's fortunes, what are the sorts of things that you keep a close eye on for the future?
I think there's probably three key areas of focus, if we're looking at digital and its support to the midstream sector. I'd suggest the first is how does digital play an even greater role in the safety of transporting hydrocarbons? How do we digitize and automate a pipe to remove the potential human error, as an example? I think the other one is, how does digital change the boundaries of fixed operating assets? Geographically, you're not going to move a fractionation facility. You're not going to move a pipe or a rail line. But digital blurs those lines, as it has in a number of other different industries. And it's going to be really interesting to see how digital twins, as an example, enable the breakdown of those physical geographical constraints. I say thirdly, how does digital affect our sort of traditional operating model, and in particular that sort of traditional customer-supplier relationship? And in the midstream sector, as an example, how do we make ordering 30,000 barrels of crude as easy as ordering a book on Amazon? And how do you track your package? And when is it expected? And how do I alter that mid-flow? I think it's going to be really interesting where digital plays in this space as we move forward. So those three areas for me are areas of great sort of anticipation as we sort of slowly evolve and integrate more holistically digital technologies into the midstream sector.
Chris, I'd like to thank you very much for appearing on ADIPEC Energy Dialogues today. And we will all keep a close eye, of course, on the impact of digital on the midstream as it goes forward.
Thanks very much, Jeffrey. Thanks for having me.
This has been another episode of Energy Dialogues, and tune in again for future episodes. Thank you very much.